Welcome back to Botanical Interests. My name is Shannie McCabe. I am a Central Florida gardener in Zone 9B, and today we are talking all about the plants that we can sow in the month of June. Now, I am sweltering hot down here in Central Florida, but I am not going to keep these selections just to my region. This video is going to cover the entire map. I am going to talk about things that should be sown in the month of June down here in the southeast, all the way up the map until we get up to the far northerly reaches for you very hardy northern gardeners. So if you don't see your zone quite yet, I'm getting to it. Stay tuned. I am going to start in the south and work my way north. Let's start in Florida, the southeast, the hottest reaches of the country. June is a fabulous month in Florida. There, I said it. I never thought I would say something like that. Being a dyed-in-the-wool New Englander, I used to despise the heat of a Florida summer, and I really didn't like the month of June because it sort of felt like the beginning of the end. It was the start of a very long, hot summer. Now I've learned to love the month of June. One, because there's so much abundance in my garden. It's a big harvesting month. We are pulling out a lot of the very best of our springtime crops. Right now, my pantry is full of freshly dug potatoes. I just pulled up a bunch of onions, garlic. I've still got tons of cucumbers, green beans coming in. I'm enjoying the last of my carrots and my beets that I've dug up. I've got melons that are just about to finish off, and I've got watermelons that are well on their way to maturing. So this is just a beautiful month of abundance. All of that hard work in early spring really pays off by the month of June. Your table is looking absolutely lush with tons of beautiful veggies on the table. So June is truly, truly a fabulous month as far as your farm to table, you're eating what you've been growing. And it's also a really pivotal month where we are switching over to summertime mode completely. So there's absolutely no fudging it. You have to have only the most heat tolerant crops by the time you're planting in June. And you can either choose to do some heat tolerant cover crops to feed your soil, give your soil and your garden a rest for the summer, or you can put in some main crops, some crops that you'll plan to eat or to harvest for use, and you will be not necessarily using them to build your soil or rest your garden, but to actually enjoy to eat. You could go one of two ways in your garden in the month of June and going forward for summer in our area in the southeast, and I'm going to talk about each of those options now. First, let's cover cover cropping. Cover cropping is when we are not growing in our garden a main crop like a watermelon to enjoy from eating, but we are actually planting a crop that feeds the soil, something that is going to either rest the garden soil or even better, that's going to add some good quality organic matter to make the soil better quality, maybe adding nitrogen or perhaps actually fighting some of the problematic pests that we have in our soil in Florida. So a cover crop is basically something that we don't necessarily grow to eat, we more grow it to feed or improve the soil. And there are plenty of cover crop choices for the month of June for Florida. And let me just quickly say, you do not have to choose to cover crop your entire garden, your entire farm, all of your fields. You could just select one field, one row in your field, one raised bed, one container to cover crop, and you could do a main crop in your other beds. You can mix and match. If you are noticing one particular part of your garden is very, very heavily infested with root knot nematode, that would be probably the best place to start with cover cropping. For example, I have a tomato field that is run over with root knot nematode. This is a very common pest in the soil, in the sandy soil of the southeast in Florida. And I have a couple of cover crop solutions that are actually going to suppress the root knot nematode, the RKN, and we'll talk about them right now. One, we can do the French marigold. French marigolds are known as a biofumigant. They can actually kill the root knot nematode in your soil. They're not going to kill your root knot nematode population forever, but they will suppress the population for at least a season or two. So rotating in some French marigolds in between your tomato plantings or other crops that are susceptible to RKN is a great choice. You could definitely plant French marigolds in a nice thick carpet in your garden in the month of June in the southeast, and you're going to get wonderful root knot nematode control from that. You're going to sow those plants very densely. We're not going to interplant them or mix them into a main crop garden. We're actually going to make sure that we we just plant the entire thing like a carpet. That's what makes it most effective. So we're going to plant a blanket of French marigolds. We're going to allow them to bloom, and then right when they're really in that peak open-headed phase, before they've started to die off and fade, when they are at peak with their open heads, we're going to chop the plants down, break them up, and dig them into the soil and let them break down. This is going to trigger the biofumigants present in the plant to actually kill the root knot nematode and to sort of clear out the soil for the fall crop that you're going to put in. So get those marigolds in the ground now in the month of June so that by the time your fall tomato crop is ready to go in the ground, your soil has been cleaned up. You can follow the same practice with a certain type of brassica, Brassica juncea, which is the mustard green. Mustard greens are rich in glucosinolates, and if you chop up those mustard greens nice and rough, break up those cell walls, and you till them into the garden, they're also going to trigger a biofumigant reaction that's going to kill your root knot nematode. So month of June, either plant some French marigolds or some Brassica juncea, some mustard greens, and break them up after they have peaked in their flowering, and you are going to find that they do a great job in suppressing your root knot nematodes. This is one of the very best ways to work on the RKN problem because there really aren't a lot of other solutions. Another cover crop option is to add nitrogen to your soil by growing a legume. Here are two legumes that are going to fix nitrogen in your soil. That could be the cowpea. Cowpeas love a Florida summer. They're going to drink up all the heat and humidity they can take. They're going to convert your atmospheric nitrogen that is otherwise unusable in the atmosphere and convert it to usable nitrogen in your soil. So they are excellent for your soil. They're also going to add organic matter to your soil when you turn them in to the ground. You also could plant butterfly pea. This is a beautiful ornamental crop that has been instrumental as a leguminous nitrogen fixing cover crop in places like Australia, but it also works great in Florida. Plant some butterfly pea, let it cover your garden beds with beautiful blue blooms, and then turn them in and you're going to be richer in nitrogen in your soil for it. Some other cover crop options that can absolutely take the heat of a Florida summer would be sorghum, millet, or sun hemp, aka crotalaria. These are other common options for June planted cover crops that can actually fix and feed your soil. Okay, aside from the cover crops, let's talk about main crops. These are edible or useful crops that we can grow right now, planted in the month of June. We've got things like okra. Okra takes an obscene amount of heat. And okra's cousin, roselle. This is also known as sorrel in the Caribbean, and this plant will make delicious, tangy foliage, and then these really beautiful bright red calyces or modified petals that can be made into a bright red vitamin C rich tea in the fall. So we've got okra, we've got roselle. Those are two hibiscus relatives that thrive in a Florida summer. Also, it's a great time to plant an edible leaf hibiscus. This is, in my humble opinion, the very best heat-tolerant leafy green because things like kale, they are done now for the summer. If you want a summertime salad in the Southeast, you've got to pivot to something like edible leaf hibiscus. It's also time to plant things like turmeric, ginger, galangal, or cardamom. Any of those rhizome-forming spices are great when planted in the month of June. I always plant these in grow bags. They seem to perform best in my area when done in a grow bag, and I like to keep them in at least a partially shaded location, if not a fairly heavy shaded location. I have really found that these plants do best when they get some shade. It's also an excellent month to plant things like sweet potato. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with sweet potatoes. Yes, I love them because they grow very vigorously in a Florida summer. They will take over quickly. I love them because you can eat the foliage. I love them because they are such a nutritious staple crop. The challenge I have with sweet potatoes is one, once you plant them once, you're going to have them forever. They're pretty persistent in your soil and it's hard to dig them all out completely. So you better make sure that you commit to the area and that you don't mind picking sweet potatoes in perpetuity. And two, I find that sweet potatoes in Florida, I have a little trouble getting them to truly sweeten up and taste really yummy like a good orange sweet potato should. And that is because I don't have a good cool storage area for my sweet potatoes in the summer. Because sweet potatoes really sweeten up when they get into their colder storage, not frozen, not super cold storage, but they want to be in the mid 50s to really take on that sweet flavor to convert their starches into sugars. And I found that I don't have a whole lot of spaces like that in Florida. We have a very high water table, so I don't have a basement where that would be where I would store sweet potatoes usually when I grew up in New England or when I was growing in the Missouri Ozarks. You would usually store your sweet potatoes in a basement or a root cellar, and that's where they would really take on their sweet flavor. And in Florida, I just haven't found the right place to store them so that they can really sweeten up. This is also the time to plant your edible gourds. Whether you do loofah gourd and you enjoy the immature fruits for a zucchini and summer squash substitute and then allow them to mature into sponges, or whether you do something like the cucuzza gourd, which is an Italian type gourd that is again edible like a zucchini or summer squash when immature and small, and then as it gets larger it becomes more ornamental. Ooh, burst of wind. Some other incredibly heat tolerant, perfect when planted in June crops would be things like long beans and cowpeas. We already talked about cowpeas and how they make a great cover crop, but they're also a delicious edible main crop. And long beans are just really a longer version of the cowpea, and they vine nicely, they cover a trellis beautifully. They're kind of ornamental as well as edible. Speaking of ornamental, we also have butterfly pea. Again, I mentioned that as a great cover crop option, but butterfly pea makes an absolutely beautiful climbing vine, ornamental for the summertime. You could take those beautiful bright blue flowers and make them into a delicious and soothing tea. Butterfly pea is just my #1 favorite Florida flower. I think it's just the top choice for the region. And I think that it is just a really, really useful plant because it also fixes nitrogen and improves your soil. June is also the crucial month if you plan to have Halloween pumpkins in your garden. If you are going to do a little pumpkin patch in your garden, you have to get them in the month of June if you want them to mature in time. So we are going to make sure that we select the right type of pumpkin, because you cannot just grow any old pumpkin. You certainly cannot grow, an Atlantic giant pumpkin here in Florida. It is just way too hot. Your pumpkin vines will die. But if you select in the species moschata, that is a Cucurbita moschata, you will get a nice pumpkin. So we try for something like the Seminole pumpkin that is native to Florida. It performs very well throughout a Florida summer. Or you could try something like the Orange Bulldog. Orange Bulldog pumpkins were bred by the University of Georgia. It's a Cucurbita moschata. It can take a ton of heat and humidity. I have tried, true, and tested. I have planted the Orange Bulldog in my garden in June and harvested them just in time for Halloween in the fall. So that one definitely will do it for you. If you can get your hands on some of those seeds, that is an excellent choice to make yourself a little pumpkin patch. Of course, if you are looking for the most heat tolerant flower possible, you've got to go with the zinnia. You can still sow zinnia seeds in the month of June. Botanical Interest has about a zillion different varieties of zinnia, and it is a great way to get splashes of color all throughout your garden with extremely low maintenance. Now let's move it on north. Let's talk about the middle of the country, the northern regions of the country. June can look a little bit different depending on where you're at. Now, if you're in the mid part of the country, you've probably been frost-free for at least a month now, and you are moving on to your second and third successions of your frost-tender annual crops. In that case, it is a great month to get more successions of things like green beans, cucumbers, radishes if your area isn't getting too hot already. It's also a great time to get your melons, your watermelons, your pumpkins, and your squashes planted. By June in these areas, the nighttime temperatures have warmed up so that it is safe to get those truly tender crops in the ground. If you are trying for things like okra and sweet potato, now is the time to get them in. You're gonna want as long a frost-free period as possible to get those things to work. If you're into flowers, it is a great month to plant your sunflowers, your nasturtiums, your zinnias, your marigolds, and maybe your morning glories. Now, this is going to depend on if morning glories tend to become invasive in your area or not, because that really varies across the map. If it's not a problem for you, morning glories are fabulous when planted in the month of June. You've got so many options. I love those Grandpa Otts. I love the morning glory relatives like the cardinal climber and the moonflower. Every June, like clockwork, my little sister, she's located in Rhode Island, she's a flower farmer, she will plant some moonflowers right at the base of her privacy fence, and they will climb up her fence, and by late summer they're the most beautiful, beautiful, large blooms. It's one of my favorite things about going home and visiting every late summer is seeing those beautiful white moonflowers. So if you want a nice crop of moonflowers, plant them in the month of June. Finally, let's address you far northern gardeners. You are the ones who might still be looking at the chance of frost in the early part of the month of June. I really tip my hat to you. That is hardcore to have such a long winter, but typically in those very far northern areas, you are rewarded with a more mild summertime climate, which does allow you to put in successions of things like carrots and radishes and beets and lettuces and kales in the month of June. And for that, I'm truly jealous because any of those tender annuals are long gone for me, and I'm going to be eating some pretty hardcore heat tolerant crops for the rest of the summer. And I only wish I could be sowing a carrot right about now. So everything's a balance. I definitely have a lot of respect for the far northern gardeners. You've been waiting very patiently. As soon as your last frost date passes and your soil is reliably warming at night, that should, for those most farther northern gardeners, should be about mid-June, maybe late June if you're really far up there, maybe at a high elevation. That's when you're going to get those tender crops in. That's when you're going to sneak in your crops of your green beans and your cucumbers. And if you are trying for a watermelon in the far north area or a melon, if you're going with cantaloupes, you've got to try the Minnesota midget. That one is one of the fastest to mature, so you could squeeze it into an ultra short growing season. Or you can go for watermelons, you would want to go with the cream of Saskatchewan watermelon. That's one that we sell at Botanical Interest as well. That one also has a much shorter days to maturity, so the best chance of success if you're growing in the very far northern reaches. So it doesn't matter where you're gardening, whether you're way up north or you're down south with me, you have got plenty of work to do in the month of June. I hope you've got lots of dirt under your fingernails. Let me know in the comments what you're going to be planting this month. Happy gardening.